Welcome back to Newsmaker Live. I'm Clinton Reynolds. Thank you very much for staying tuned to the program. We're here with former Foreign Minister Rufus Bousquet, and we're discussing a number of issues here tonight. It's the new year, so we want to see where our country is and where we're heading for 2013. And that's a good way to start. Later on this year, hopefully next month, we'll have Prime Minister Dr. Kenny Anthony. He has committed to coming on, but we just have to pin down the date. Knowing his schedule, he travels extensively on behalf of the country, so when we can get him in here, we will, and he has promised that very soon he will sit with me once again to discuss the St. Lucia issues related to the island. Now I want to start with the economy.
Right.
It's an area where we should be concerned, but
yes,
many of us don't seem that perturbed about what's happening around us and globally as far as the economy. What do you think about our economy at present?
Well, I mean, the key premise upon which I will respond to your question revolves around the fact that we can't affect the global economy. Mm-hmm. St. Lucia certainly can't do that. But the global economy can affect us.
Right.
And so almost everything that we do and what ought to inform public policy has to, to some extent, revolve around what's taking place outside of St. Lucia. And I say that because whilst I know that there are many public servants in the Ministry of Finance who factor in these particular statistics and what the economists have to say in terms of where they think things are going and what is likely to happen and so on. But nonetheless, I still don't think we do enough of that. And in terms of our own statistical department, again, this is by no means a criticism of the people who are there. And I have to be very careful these days because you're always accused of criticizing people, and I don't want to be accused. Mm-hmm. I said in 2013 I'm criticizing nobody. Okay, it's a new year, no criticism. But nonetheless, I must point out to the fact that what I see happening in St. Lucia, which troubles me and has troubled me for a long time, is the fact that St. Lucia is a saving nation. We do save a lot of money as a people. Mm-hmm. We tend to anyway, and especially the elderly. And what you have is you do have liquidity in the banking sector. Mm-hmm. But we have reached a point in our lives and in our development as a country where what you'd call the utilization rate of the savings in our banks is extremely low, because St. Lucians, for the most part, have yet to present to banks bankable projects that they're sufficiently satisfied with, that they could say, okay, I'm going to advance you the capital in order to proceed with that project. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, there's also a situation where people may not have anything themselves to put down and therefore have no stake in the store. So therefore, the bank is not going to take all the risk for you. I mean, that's just not going to happen. And what you find is that people come from overseas with some capital, or with certainly a wealth of experience or a very extensive business CV, and then go to our banks, borrow our money, do projects in our country in the name of creating and generating employment. And whilst in the absence of anything else, you find that the policymakers may be somewhat reluctant not to go against this. But the reality is that over a period of time, you are basically resigning your people to becoming a nation of waiters and waitresses. Mm-hmm. And we have to be very careful about the policies that we put in place, because believe me, there are some politicians who have no difficulty with that. And of course, there are some of our people who themselves have no difficulty with that, simply because they do not understand the process. I believe there is a better way. But nonetheless, as a result of this lack of utilization of our own savings, because this is what's going on, a lot of money goes into, for example, the purchase of things like government bonds, etc., etc. And so the savers are the ones who are financing the government, whether it be the insurance companies or the pension schemes such as the NIS, etc., who take the people's money, and because of the low risk associated with government paper, they will go and purchase government paper and do that. Currently, the governments in recent past have been able to finance a lot of capital expenditure, job creation, etc., by issuing these bonds. But as the climate changes and people become more wary of buying bonds, or maybe the savings rate goes down because people are now spending their money, you know, there's a lot more unemployment, etc., and people are spending it for day-to-day goods and services, you find a situation where you're going to see a gradual reduction in the quality of life in the country unless something dramatic is done about that.
Now, what do you propose can be done to turn the situation around? You said that St. Lucians are not presenting bankable projects for support from the lending institutions. How can they go around changing that and making sure that the patrimony is protected? Because what you have described to me tantamounts to some degree to recolonization, if you want to put it that way.
I know it's a harsh word, isn't it? Recolonization.
Well, I mean, it's a fact.
It's a harsh word. You know, it smacks of all sorts of things from racism on down. You know, it's sort of a denuding of the people's value, you know, in their own country. But in reality, that's exactly what it is. And it's a little controversial, but nonetheless, this is what it is. And in the final analysis, what you'll find is that people will rise against it. Now, you asked a very important question. What do you do about this? Well, there are no easy fixes to it. But nonetheless, what we have in St. Lucia is a tradition of government being everything. I mean, politicians go out of their way to try and be everything. Oh, well, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. Just vote for me, you know, and you know, you're gonna have jobs, we're gonna employ people, and then the reality turns out to be entirely different. And yet, our people continue to play the same old political game, which, if you really dig deep into it, is really a form of just reliance. You know, a failure to grasp onto things, to hold on to things, and to have even personal independence. Now, if your independence is not at a personal level, it cannot be at a national level. I mean, you've got to have people who have a flair and a sense of, look, I'm independent. You know, I'm going to stand up on my own. And I can tell you as a politician, I mean, you know, say what you want. I'm not looking for votes. So the reality is people come to you as a politician and they expect you to solve their problems for them. Because, you know, this is what we do. We go out there and we say, hey, look, I'm going to solve your problem.
Or some politicians promise that they would solve the problem.
Absolutely, you know, and then what, and this is what we've been going through for generation after generation. There are no easy fiscal fixes, but what it means is, as you gradually wean the people off that nipple of dependency, the government has to take a premier role. But it has to be an active, established policy that is enunciated for public consumption and for public acceptance. You can't do it by simply saying, look, sit down in a room with, you know, your cabinet and decide, okay, we're going to do this. There's not sufficient dialogue. For a small country, there's not sufficient dialogue between the policymakers and the people. There has to be more dialogue. This is a family. This is not some place that's so big that it cannot be a family affair. That we cannot sit here and talk to the people and say, look, this is the reality, all right, for fear of hurting their feelings. We've got to say, this is the reality. This is where we are. You know, we're giving away, and government can get those statistics. 70% of your savings goes to give government money, which we then use and spend irresponsibly and inefficiently, and then the other 30% or 20% of the rest of it goes to assisting people in doing grandiose projects in the country with a view to creating employment for you. You know, so we're really helping you out here now. Many of them have turned upside down, by the way. And, you know, the other 10% goes for you to buy cars and land. And in some rare cases, a few people will build houses and do something constructive, okay? Constructive if the house is increasing in value. Not constructive if it's going down in value and you can't pay the mortgage. So let's look at all of that. But my point here, though, without getting overly complicated and overly detailed, is that there has to be a shift in the way the business of this country is done. Too often people go out there and they do things, they say things, and they come back. It's the same old merry-go-round of political tricks on platforms, of turning our people against each other, of the tribalism of party politics, and it's either one side or the other getting totally frustrated and not getting what it is they expect out of it.
So who's responsible for that feeling? Is it a feeling of the government? Is it a feeling of the politicians who seek elective office? Is it a feeling of the electorate? Who's responsible, or is it a collective failure on the society's part?
Well, it's a collective failure, but the answer is not, it doesn't come from everybody. You know, somebody has to bell the cat. Somebody has to come in there, and people have to start saying, okay, who are we looking to? Or what are we looking for? And when people ask themselves that question, instead of saying, boy, I'm a UWP, you know, I could die UWP, they could send a broomstick, I'm voting for it. I mean, how silly can that be? But when people start changing their minds and maturing, because you see, the idea behind all of that is, if UWP gets in power, they'll fire all the Labour bus drivers and my bus will work. Okay, the Labour guy, well, boy, if Labour gets in, you fire all the UWP, or you could just go to the point and, but look, man, all that work I did for you, my whole family vote for you, or my father was putting me out, and, you know, I let him put me out just so I could vote for you, so now you owe me for the rest of your life. You know what I mean? Which puts a strain on the politician as soon as he gets elected. The reality, though, is that if we can get past that, and we can start hearing some different messages, and this is one of the reasons why I speak the way that I do, because I've had an opportunity to view this thing, and I don't think that it is enlightening if you address the basest instincts of our people and call yourself a leader and say, look, I'm going to take advantage of that because that is what has happened, and this is the way our people think. And the best way for me to find favor with the people, or the majority of people, whether in my party or otherwise, is to deal with their basest instincts. So if I'm a UWP guy, I expect that, you know, it's good political fodder to go and say, yeah, man, the Labour Party, they're doing all these things wrong, and let's go out there and attack them, and let's mess them up, and if the country is looking bad, then everybody will turn against them, and then, you know, we can get in power. And then they turn around, they do the same thing. And then we go through that merry-go-round all over again. So the reality, though, is that for me, you have to elevate yourself if you're going to appeal to people and to come with solutions to the problems that we're facing. The fact is that the world is an extremely difficult place. I mean, there are a lot of very good things that are happening overseas in the global economy. But there are a lot of bad things that are there as well. And nobody can tell you readily how this is going to pan out. For the more sophisticated investors who have money in stock markets, on global markets, whether it be, you know, financial markets or commodity markets, as the case may be, these people are likely to be okay, because all the central banks in the world are flooding their countries with easy money. There's an easy money policy in the United States. The Japanese have now adopted an easy money policy, and a lot of countries are trying to debase their currencies to improve their exports. That's basically it. My exports are going to be cheaper. The Chinese do it. You know, the Germans are having a tough time now. The Japanese are doing it like crazy now. And so we've got a situation now where that is going to be good for equities and these types of investments. Not so good for bonds, but excellent for equities, and these people will make their money. But for the less sophisticated people, though, whilst you might find that capital markets are doing well, you might find that economies themselves generally will not do very well. It'll be filled with areas of high unemployment, high inflation. You're going to see the prices of everything going up. I mean, whether it's food, whether it's gasoline, whatever the case may be, it's going to go up, affect the quality of life of the average person. And so people are going to feel it in their pockets, even though some people are going to do very well.
Now, that brings me to a point. I was listening to a CBS report on 60 Minutes a few weeks ago, and they were saying that even though Google and some of those bigger companies are grossing more,
right,
more people are unemployed, and that's because they're going the way of robots, modern technology.
Yes.
The robots are being used to replace human beings. And whereas, you know, in the past they would outsource to China and India and pay like $3
Right.
An hour for labor. The machines that they put in place, when they look at the comparative value, they are doing the job of a Chinese or an Indian worker. So that means that they no longer have to outsource. They can keep it in the US, but people are not working.
Yes.
How is that likely to affect us or trickle down to St. Lucia and our economy?
Well, look, as far as places like the United States are concerned, St. Lucia, let's look at what people did to survive in the past. I mean, we had a banana industry that was heavily subsidized in terms of, you know, the preferential market treatment that we got. That's no longer there. We had a situation where people could readily travel, you know, go to the United States, get there illegal. Trust me, I know about that. You know, and you know, and would find themselves out there making a living and sending money back home, etc., etc. Going to Canada. Well, now what's happening?
Yeah.
Countries are so inward-looking. I mean, look at the British. Just recently, you know, a couple of days ago, the British Prime Minister is now saying there'll be a referendum on whether Britain stays in the Euro or in Europe. I mean, this is really going crazy. So the thing about it is, how tuned are we to these things? How attuned are we to the effects that it's going to have on us and on our people? Because now you don't get a US visa now unless you've got some real airtight stuff. I mean, the young person going to Barbados, you better have your stuff together. They're not giving you a visa. You're not going to Canada unless you have some airtight stuff. Now you got to get a visa. I wouldn't be surprised if the British institute a visa policy somewhere in the not too distant future.
And it appears that they're going in that direction. They're reviewing all their policies.
So all of these things are telling you that you now, the importance of government in understanding what's going on globally and in being able to adjust our policies and what we are is going to have to be a sea change, and our people must expect massive changes because it's not business as usual. And therefore, we have to make the adjustments that are necessary because the world is not going to adjust to us.
Now, I want to talk about the policies because there seems to be a school of thought, or there is a school of thought out there, that there are no policy differences between the parties that we have on island. You know, it just matters where your friends are. There's no significant policy difference. But let's take a break now. We'll take our second break. When we come back, I want you to discuss that. And also, the visa information sharing agreement that was signed recently between
Canada and the US.
How that affects us. Stay with us. Newsmaker Live continues with former Foreign Minister Rufus Bousquet right after this.